The Arya. After a certain level of maturity and health of the tree, a passage opened at its base. This passage allowed contact with 2 additional species. Okay, so there was a total of 4, including human. The first contact was with the Arya. The first contact revealed the Arya to be large, beetle-like insects. We were unable to communicate directly with them in any way, but they appeared to have some rudimentary level of intelligence. It was Lorine Toth who first made the journey through the heart to Captor, and named both the New World and the inhabitants. The Arya have 3 distinct variants that have come to be referred to as barnacle, beetle, and polyarch. Although their morphology is dramatically different from human, their internal systems, like all of our neighbors, are supported by similar atmospheric composition and basic nutrients. In the barnacle stage, the Arya are completely immobile. The Arya stay in this egg-like development state seemingly indefinitely. In order to hatch, they must be in a proximity of a polyarch and fertilized by the beetles after a certain stage of maturity. The beetles are the eyes and ears, hands, and feet. With only minimal nervous system of their own, they are essentially the sensory extensions of the immobile polyarchs. They are able to execute simple commands, but apparently have very little in the way of individual sentience. I guess that's a beetle. The Arya polyarchs are the intelligence and consciousness of the species. Although it was obvious that there was intelligence behind the species, it wasn't until Caroline Farley, wow, I can't believe I already screwed that up, began spending large amounts of time in close proximity that deeper communication began. With a room nearby, Farley was the first to communicate non-verbally and learn much about the species, including some historical information. The Arya species survived in their world while several other sentient species came and went. Among them, an ancient species who formed a deeper relationship with the Arya, carving temples and dwellings for them in the rocks. And later, a more recent species that took over much of their homeworld. This latter species was especially adept at mechanical construction, using it mostly to capture and process large flying creatures, using the beetles as bait. Or is that a beetle? Was the first one the barnacle and this one a beetle? Perhaps? I don't know. The Velen. The final species to be discovered were the Velen. The Velen had been communicating with the Arya for many years through ambassador seeds, but became part of the larger community very shortly after the Arya. Okay, so they've discussed ambassador seeds. So ambassador seeds must be something that connect twin worlds. So the Arya and the Velen are twin worlds. That's why they were communicating with each other first. And then later, through a hole in the base of the tree, we were able to communicate with all of them. Strange. With a large and imposing frame and a form of communication based on complex, multi-voiced, low-frequency rumble, the initial introductions were intimidating. After several attempts, Amelia Vidal, I'll just go with that, was able to begin some rudimentary communication. I don't even have good communication with my own human beings. I don't think I'd be able to do it with aliens. Communication, and began visiting the Velen in Mare, which she named, on a regular basis. She discovered a complex and amazing society that was able to use their technology in unexpected ways. They had the ability to quickly transform their world, using extruded structures based on some form of complex miniature substrate material. Unlike the other worlds, the Velen sphere is scooped out of a Velen resettlement group that was preparing to set off into space to find a new homeworld. This was their way of life, to put themselves into stasis and scatter themselves throughout the stars. As mentioned previously, their appearance is imposing, standing about 9 feet tall with a distinct reptilian resemblance. They have 6 limbs, 2 muscular legs and arms, and a smaller set of arms. They control every aspect of their technology with their vocalizations, but over the years, they have created control panels based on their number system that allow other species to easier access elements of their technology. That is imposing. Huh. I'm sorry there's a lot of reading in this one, but I might as well read it all since it's here. It's definitely a good story dump. Communication. Talking with our neighbors. We take communication for granted, even varied languages we find here in Hunrath. But when we suddenly find ourselves among other intelligent species who don't share our culture, history, DNA, or vocal cords, it requires a huge amount of effort for the beginning of rudimentary chatting. This quick overview will set the stage for what to expect when communicating with our neighbors. the Mofang. The Mofang were the first non-humans we met. With at least some level of similar physical vocal generating abilities, they picked up human words quickly. This early mimicry resulted in what the species became to be called. Even though they were able to mimic single words and simple phrases, it became evident over the years that the huge grammatical differences were not easily overcome. Some have proposed that the difficulty may have arisen because the Mofang insisted on attempting to learn every human language, and as a result, were never able to lock on to any consistent grammatical structure. Nevertheless, in spite of their rudimentary sentence construction, it has been very easy to communicate, and it has been unnecessary for us to learn their language beyond a few simple phrases and proper names. If you'd like to learn more about the communications with Mofang, please contact Tam. Okay. Velen. The Velen have presented a particular communication challenge from what we can gather. They produce sounds using two large reed-like structures inside opposite sides of their heads. The vibrations generated are channeled to resonance chambers in their skulls, where they are combined into a complex low-frequency dual tone. The low-frequency bitonal sounds are not only hard for humans to hear and resolve, but impossible for us to mimic. And the Velen's hearing is also orientated towards the low frequency, so they are unable to hear most of the sounds associated with human speech. Therefore, communications with the Velen has relied on technology. They have adapted consoles which the Velen fluently control with vocalization for use by other species. Over the years, some individuals of other species, including a few humans, have learned to communicate very effectively using this method. Humans have been able to pick out some higher frequency characterizations of certain key Velen words over the years, and although we can't speak to them in a way that the Velens can understand, we are occasionally able to hear and recognize these words when spoken distinctly by Velen. If you'd like to learn more about communication with the Velen, please contact Vito. Okay. Aria. None of the stages of the Aria morphology have any vocalization apparatus. Because of the obvious synchronization of the barnacle flash and the ability of the pawns to provide for and address the needs of the polyarchs, those are words that were not, because it was barnacle and beetle. I don't understand. Why would they have two different words for one species? Or one stage of one species? It was assumed that the species could communicate effectively. It was not until Farley began to spend large amounts of time in the polyarch's antechamber that the first clues to this communication became evident. After months of research, Farley began to have limited success with receiving some kind of simple messages that were coming from the polyarchs. It is apparent now that the polyarchs had been attempting to communicate the entire time, but they themselves had been experimenting with various channels until they finally got the response from Farley. After this breakthrough, others were able to tune into the polyarchs and learn to listen. Both the polyarchs and the pawns have a simple organ that can sense human vocal frequency, enabling them to sense simple responses from humans. But over the years, Farley was able to learn to speak to the polyarchs via a related form of extrasensory transmission. If you'd like to learn more about communication with the Ari, please contact Farley. That was a long one. I don't know if that helps us yet, but if we contact other species, I guess we know somewhat how to talk to them. Seed information. Okay, now we can find out about ambassador seeds, which was the first seeds. And then collector seeds, I'm assuming, were the ones that kind of collected us. Ambassador seeds were first documented about 150 Earth years ago. They occur about once every 400 days if the tree remains healthy. Natural seed swaps occur between pair of seeds that we now know dropped simultaneously from healthy trees in a paired sphere. When each seed was touched by species in sphere, the swap occurred, sending an ambassador from each sphere to the paired sphere. Location of the swap is defined by the locations of the pairs of seeds. After the first swap, the seeds recharge quickly, allowing for a quick return. First meetings were intense but naturally short. It was quite a surprise for both the Mofang and us. Over time, the seeds require more time to recharge, producing longer visits between species. Collector seeds. Everyone who arrives is familiar with the collector seeds. The bright light that we were all drawn to right before the event that brought us here is a collector seed. What new arrivers may not be aware of is that these seeds, like all seeds, come in pairs. When the tree drops a collector seed on the ground, it signals that its twin has begun to quest for a new being. That search may take hours, or it may take years. When an appropriate situation, a natural threat of deaths, is found, the seed activates and swaps a smaller but varying-sized sphere from Earth, or whatever appropriate homeworld, here to Hunrath. As Hunrath becomes more populated, we would watch for a newly dropped collector seed, collect it, and place it in the entry canyon area. This allowed us to provide a more predictable entry experience for the new arrivers and provide a single area to collect any resource that may have come along with the new arriver. Question: why was ours collected and put there if, according to at least the message that we heard in the other room, they were getting ready to leave and she was laughing at the possibility of a new arrival coming? And we're I have to make the assumption that Cecil hasn't left his workshop. So is there another human that stayed behind? Because he was supposed to be the only one. So who put the seed over there? And another thing is if the collector seeds work the same way in the alien spheres as well, that would mean that somebody is literally, I mean, you can assume just from our own, literally collecting different species and different samplings from different species in order to either just collect them or to study them or to save them in some sort, because they're making the assumption here of an unnatural death. Again, this is an assumption because of the question mark, so they're not sure. I mean, you can't really test that theory. So, unlike ambassador seeds and mother seeds, which I guess they don't know if mother seeds are actually real, collector seeds do not seem to survive. The inner core is spent, leaving only the lifeless outer husk, which we saw when we came here. Mother seeds, postulated but unverified. Right there, it says right there. First suggested by Alima Hamasa, the notion of mother seeds extrapolates the behavior of the lesser seeds to a super seed. She posited, I guess, that the process that actually created the paired spheres was similar to all the other swaps, but on a much grander scale. The idea is that two seeds from a mother tree were scattered on the galactic winds to find appropriately similar environments. When matches were found, some process was triggered that swapped large portions of landscape between vastly different worlds. Alema further noted that the tree's location in the center of the sphere suggested that the trees grew from these mother seeds. Because of the similarities, it has been conjectured that reswapping the entire environmental sphere might be possible with a larger scale version of the ambassador seed machine. There's an ambassador seed machine. We haven't seen anything even mention that until here. But this makes sense, and I see why she postulated it, was because the initial desert environment didn't mention a regular seed. And I think that's because it wasn't taking a person, it was taking an environment in order to prepare this entire dome. Oh, looks like that's it. That was interesting. Definitely a story dump, but that clears up a lot of questions we had and raises a lot more questions. Okay, so we came around to here. He still wanted us to get... I'll walk right into the post, apparently. He still wanted us to get rid of the red laser. So somehow, I'm assuming in his workshop we would be able to do that. So it's being emitted from a Mofang device that we saw up by where the waterfall was. So, go around here. Where? Oh yeah, over this way. Sorry, the tape recorder I've actually had to replay up to this point because I played a little bit past the tape recorder, just to be honest, and I was getting really bad frame rate drops for some reason. I don't know if it was because of a patch, but I've had to drop down some, wow, like that right there, some graphical settings in order to get this to run. And again, I have a 1080. This should be working just fine, but I think it's because Cyan does not know how to use the Unreal 4 engine completely yet.